Good morning and welcome to all of you to this conversation about the future of higher education. And it's our distinct privilege and my pleasure today to introduce two of the nation's most distinguished higher education leaders to have this conversation. First, Mary Sue Coleman. Dr. Coleman served as the 13th president of the University of Michigan from 2002 to 2014 and is now president emerita. In 2009, she was identified by Time magazine as one of the nation's 10 best college presidents. Prior to Michigan, she was president of the University of Iowa, provost of the University of New Mexico, faculty member for many years in biochemistry at the University of Kentucky. I could go on, but you don't want to hear from me, you want to hear from them. So while she technically retired, June 2016, will become president of the Association of American Universities, representing the leading research universities around the country. And most importantly, of course, she joined our board. So she's a trustee of the University of Denver. At Michigan, Dr. Coleman led its incredible growth, including over $5 billion in construction over her 12-year presidency. She is a remarkable fundraiser, having led the $3.2 billion Michigan Difference campaign and kicked off another $4 billion campaign before stepping down. And in her spare time, she's recently been project chair of something called the Lincoln Project. And I would commend to you the most recent report, the last in a series of reports under the auspices of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. The new report is called Public Research Universities Recommitting to Lincoln's Vision, an Educational Compact for the 21st Century. Well worth reading. We also have our own Chancellor, Dr. Rebecca Chopp, who I think really needs no introduction to this group. She is a remarkable leader in her own right, a passionate advocate for the liberal arts, and believes that the University of Denver is uniquely positioned to combine its strengths in liberal arts with its well-respected professional schools and graduate schools to reimagine higher education for the 21st century. Her most recent book, Remaking College, was identified by Phi Beta Kappa as one of the best books in the year 2014. Obviously, you all know about DU Impact 2025 and what that the goals and the objectives and the aspirations that has for the University of Denver. And so I'm delighted to be introducing to you today Dr. Rebecca Chopp and Dr. Mary Sue Coleman.
So first let me welcome everyone here today. Mary Sue, we have staff and faculty, some students, we have donors, friends. This is the second of what I hope annual series on conversations around higher education with really distinguished presidents. Last year, Donna Shalala was here, and this year we're thrilled to have Mary Sue Coleman. So I'm going to jump right in. Okay. So Mary Sue, you really have had an amazing career. So just a girl from Iowa, right?
Right.
Just a girl from Iowa. Yay, the Midwest.
Yes.
BA from Grinnell College, PhD from UNC, faculty member at University of Kentucky, provost of University of New Mexico, president of Iowa, president of the University of Michigan, now incoming president at the Association of American Universities, which I and many consider the most prestigious and in many ways the most important association in higher education. That's a lot of accomplishments. So how do you think of across all these many positions, what's leadership now for you? How do you think about it? What have you learned? What's been especially challenging? What advice do you have for all the potential provosts and presidents in this room?
Okay. Well, for me, being president of a university was never a goal. It wasn't something that I started out my academic life with an aspiration toward. It happened, I think, through a series of revelations to me and opportunities and interest in pursuing some really things that came along for me. I think I was very fortunate to have started my faculty career at the University of Kentucky, because that was an institution that had great aspirations. And it also was one that really encouraged people who had an interest to get deeply engaged in the university. So I was a faculty member for 20 years before I ever began this administrative journey. And I had a very robust lab. I understood how hard it is to be a faculty member. I mean, those who aren't in the trenches and don't have to teach and don't have to get research grant funding, run labs, do all the service across the university for students and to counsel students, really have no clue about how I used to admire so much this role of the faculty. I mean, it is critical. And of course, you see staff that are very important to the running of the organization. So I think having that experience is critical, because once you do get into administrative roles, then you understand what the challenges are the people that you are leading are encountering every day. And if you don't understand that, then it's very difficult, it seems like to me, to lead. So when I had the opportunity, I started out in a cancer center, and I was the cancer center director unexpectedly left, and I was doing cancer research, and they said, come and, please help us out. And I said, well, that's not what I want to do, but they did convince me, and so I sort of did that and directed the cancer center for a while, and then that started an opportunity. And so here's what I've learned, though. You have to listen. You have to really know how to listen. And you have to listen to understand, not always to agree. I used to love the students who would come and want something that I couldn't give them, and they would be passionate about how this was going to change the world, and Kentucky had to be a leader, or Iowa had to be a leader, or Michigan had to be a leader. And I said, I understand this, I get it, I listen very carefully, maybe bring in some other experts, but at the end of the day, I don't agree with you. I can't do this, and this is why. And I think being able to explain, that is, understand, being willing to change your mind. So I want to tell you a quick story. It's a funny one about learning to change your mind and not standing on something that you had decided. So this happened about 2008 in my Michigan presidency. And one of the big things at Michigan that is very symbolic is that when the students graduate, they get their diplomas at Michigan Stadium. Michigan Stadium, the big house, seats 110,000 people. So it is one of the largest venues, outdoor venues in the United States. So it's very symbolic for them to go. Well, we were reconstructing Michigan Stadium that year, and it was impossible to have the commencement at Michigan Stadium, so we were going to have to move it. So I was looking at, and we had to accommodate 40,000 people. So I was looking, where can we have it, where can we have it? Well, Eastern Michigan University is 7 miles down the road, and they have a nice stadium, and I said, we will cover it with maize and blue, we'll have buses, we'll do everything. I checked with student government, with my regents, with the faculty leadership. I thought I had checked all over the place. We're just going to do it. Too bad. It's going to be wonderful. It's going to be great. You're going to have a memorable commencement. Fabulous speaker. Well, then I sent out the memo about we were going to do this. I have never received so many emails in such a short period of time of horror from the students that I would even think about this, going to EMU for their graduation. So I said, okay, we need to, plan B, we need to think about this. What can we do? And we listened to students, had a town hall. What could we do? What could we do? Well, we came up with 2 possibilities. One was to hold the commencement outdoors on the Diag. Now, the Diag is also a sacred place at the University of Michigan. It's a quadrangle, and it's big enough to hold 40,000 chairs, which is what I had to have. And we had another place called Elbell Field, which is where the band practices, which is also a nice space, could hold 40,000 chairs. So I said, okay, these are our options, so we're going to send out a vote. And students, you vote on which one of these you would want, and we'll do it. So, of course, they overwhelmingly voted for the Diag, which I was afraid of. But they did, and so it cost me $2 million extra. We had to level the Diag. We had to cover it with plastic flooring, and the squirrels were going nuts because they couldn't find the ground. And we rented every chair in a 4-state area. because they had to be all these white chairs that would look really good and put up all these big video screens. But it was a very memorable commencement, and they loved it, and peace was had after that. So that was my changing my mind in the face of overwhelming opposition.
That's something good to remember. And it's also good to remember, one, that not only you have to change your mind, but B, no matter how many times you check all the boxes, you still can't anticipate.
You can
what
still
happens.
be wrong. Yeah, right. You can still be wrong.
So let's talk about Michigan.
Yeah.
So you did tremendous things there, improved academic quality, expanded the research profile. We'll talk about many of those things. You really were a builder. So, you know, we love this campus. This campus has been rebuilt. She's done the same thing at Michigan. In 12 years of your presidency, University of Michigan spent $5.3 billion in construction.
Yeah.
$5.3 billion, including a $754 million children and women's hospital. The part of the building I want to focus on is what you did for students. I want to begin with students because, you know, I always like to begin with students. So you went in and really reimagined the residential housing framework for student life, including spending $550 million on existing student housing and $185 million on graduate student housing. Why did you do this? And what was it that you were going for? What were you trying to accomplish?
Well, when I came to Michigan and started really understanding what the institution had invested in on the prior 35 years, it quickly became apparent to me that residential life, that is, the places that the students lived, had to compete with academic buildings, and they always lost. So whenever you were talking about a new biology building or chemistry or whatever, and of course, you have to have good facilities for the faculty to do their work and for the students to learn. So I understood why people had made the decisions that they had made. So nothing, I mean, we had done the life safety issues for housing, so they, you know, we had safe places, but they simply hadn't been touched in terms of the aesthetic appeal, the kind of spaces that students need today, the really high-tech infrastructure that you need for residence halls. And we had some halls that we called heritage halls that were built back in the 20s and the 30s that were gorgeous, that you could never afford to build today because they were so beautiful. And I said, okay, this is something that is really important, because what we want is our residents to intersect, our residence halls to intersect with the intellectual life of the university. We want these to be places where students expand their learning opportunities, that they don't just go to a place to sleep. We built it as an integral part of their experience of coming to Michigan. And what would be a differentiator for us? We didn't do luxury climbing walls and, you know, nothing like that. This was to be where we could consider how the rooms were organized. Were there spaces for study? Were there spaces where students could collectively work on projects? Were there spaces where faculty could go in and lecture in the residence halls to bring some additional life? Were there music performances that could be had, theater performances? So we really wanted to think about this in a totally different way. And so we started with that framework, built up a list, and we had a whole list of our residence halls, which were the ones that were worst need, and we had phase 1, phase 2, and in order to accomplish it, we had to have 1% of the residence hall rates each year devoted to the bond indebtedness that we did for the construction, plus we put in something like $150 million of our own money, so that it was a partnership. It was a partnership with the students, a partnership with the university. And the faculty, well, you know, some people grumbled about it. I think at the end of the day, because we were also investing in academic buildings, that they could see why this was so important that we do this. And it's been spectacular. On the graduate student housing, you know, we, like many universities back in the 70s, had built, you know, married student housing, and it was sort of pushed at the edge of campus. And it's falling apart. You know, at some point it's going to have to be replaced or torn down or whatever. But what I discovered is that the large majority of graduate students are not married these days. I mean, it's just a different dynamic. And so I wanted to build a graduate residence hall. And I found a partner in one of our donors. And it's a very interesting and unusual construction. Design, let's put it that way, not construction, but design. And it's centered around the idea of 7 rooms that are centered around a common space with very big common space, luxurious kitchen facilities. Every single 7 unit has its own washer dryer. I mean, this is spectacular. And I had a donor with a lot of money willing to do it. But the idea was to get people from different disciplines at the graduate level and put them together in these sort of pods. And the feedback, it's been open 2 years now, and the feedback that I've gotten is just uniformly ecstatic. It's right there on the really heart of campus, and graduate students from all over are part of this residence experience. And so for me, I think it's one of the things that has really helped the university advance.
That's fascinating that you have the graduate students from other disciplines, because on our campus we hear our graduate students are just so desirous of this interdisciplinary conference. They've organized their own big interdisciplinary research conference.
And that's what's happened in this residence halls. It has 602 rooms, and each room has its own bathroom. I mean, this is really luxurious, and lots of common space, a running track on the 8th floor with the best views of Ann Arbor of anybody could possibly have. And they have a store inside. You know, what we've discovered about them is now they're putting together all sorts of interest groups, and it's all about developing themselves as intellectual beings. I mean, it's really fascinating to me how people are using the spaces, but I think it's wonderful and I love it.
Sounds very different than where I lived at the University of Chicago.
Yeah, I'm sure, and even where I lived at Grinnell.
So research, I do want to get to that. I mean, you have just been named, and this really is, I think, that one of the most prestigious positions in America, and one of the most important right now. And I'm not surprised you were named this post, because what you did at Michigan in research is really spectacular. Michigan now has, I think, the largest state budget for university, for a public university. And of course, this is an era where funding has been cut back dramatically, and yet you expanded the research. You bought the Pfizer campus. So talk a little bit about why you did that, how you did it, but also what you see going forward. What do you want to accomplish at the AAU based on your Michigan experience?
Well, you know, the University of Michigan has long been distinguished as an institution that has enormous breadth in the scholarly disciplines and in the research that it conducts. And one of the things that I saw right away in coming into the institution is that while we had a lot of interdisciplinary interaction, which I think is an enormous strength at the graduate level, we didn't have as much at the undergraduate. So I wanted to bring that into the undergraduate level as well. And I also thought that we could really do more if we could bring together the resources to go after the big projects from the federal government that one discipline can't possibly compete effectively for. So we had to put together big teams. We had to go after really big things. And we've done that with some NASA missions, with what's called M-City. And M-City could not have been possible without our Pfizer purchase, because Pfizer was contiguous to our campus, 184 acres. And what M-City is a city for automated vehicles. It's a model city. So it has streets and stoplights and little storefronts and everything else. And we are developing cars that don't need a driver in this place. It's the only place in the country that has it. But so let me get back to the Pfizer purchase, and this was in the midst of really, I'd hired a new VP for research who had, I don't know, 100 patents himself and started 3 companies, and he was a tremendous academic from Princeton. He had gotten his PhD actually at Michigan, so I had a little pull to get him back. But he understood, that is, what we had to do both to advance kind of be the research itself, but also to translate some of those research findings into products that make it easier for people to start companies, make it easier for tech transfer, and we did all that. But Pfizer told us back in 2007 that they were going to abandon their R&D in Ann Arbor, and this was a huge and terrible blow to the city because it was a big, big operation. In fact, it's where Lipitor was discovered and developed, was at that place. And it employed 3,000 people, and this was going to be a terrible thing for the taxes of the city, housing, everything. It was awful. So we put together a big team right away, the governor, the mayor, me, and tried to start brainstorming about what we could do. Now, this wasn't an easy purchase because we would be taking it off the tax rolls if we bought it. And that was very difficult for the city to digest. But there were also covenants on the land because it turns out we had sold most of the land to Pfizer and its predecessor companies over the last 50 years. And there were use restrictions on the land. That is, we would never have allowed a strip mall we just weren't going to do that. And so there was a long period of Pfizer trying to sell it to another company. And we tried to help them do that. I mean, I knew nobody was going to buy it because it was in the depths of the recession. I mean, this was in 2008. And they were still having to pay taxes on it, and they didn't like that because they had $1 billion worth of research labs sitting on that property that had been recently renovated. I mean, for them, it was a disaster. But we kept trying to be helpful and helpful and helpful. And finally, 2 years in 2009, we made an offer because I thought I had to let enough time pass because if I'd gone in and tried to buy it right away, I would have gotten a lot of criticism. And the university would have gotten a lot of criticism. And the community needed to see that nobody else was going to buy it. And what I was very fearful about, and I think would have happened, is that Pfizer would have raised the buildings to reduce their taxes if we hadn't bought it. And so that would have been, for me, a terrible outcome. So I went in with an offer of, I think my first offer that I went in was $120 million for $1 billion worth of lab space and 184 acres of land. And they said, no, we're going to do. And I was dealing with the CEO. We can't sell it to you for that. And I said, okay, fine, I'll wait. I'm in no hurry here. I've got an infinite amount of time that I can wait. And they didn't, and I knew that. And so a few months later, he came back and said, well, I have another offer of $200 million. What will you do? And I said, take that other offer. You just take it. Because if it's the kind of company that I think you're going to have because of the covenants, good deal for you and good for us. And, he hung up. And then about a week later, my CFO came in and said, well, Pfizer has reached out to us, and they're willing to negotiate around this $120 million. I said, great, this is really good, let's go. And then we thought, well, there might be some environmental damage. So we wanted them to hold, we were going to hold back $12 million, and we ended up paying $108 million for this property. And which was one of the best deals I've ever done. I loved it. I loved it. It was so great. Well, I had one of my regents who was a real estate lawyer advising me about every step of the way, and I said, yes, I can do this. I can negotiate. So in any event, that all happened. But what it did was it opened up this whole possibility because now we had 2 million square feet of research space. I mean, about 40% was office, but it was 2 million square feet that we could put new entities. We did a big health services research institute out there. We did MCity. We did an accelerator for faculty businesses. We did a business engagement center so the community could come in and interact with us and use our space. We put a big cardiology research unit out there. And without that, we would have had trouble expanding the way we did because we didn't have the space. So space is so important. So it was an interesting adventure. And now we have, I think, we had a 10-year plan, and we're not 10 years in yet. And I think something like 2,500 people are working at that site. And so we've almost completely replenished what Pfizer had, to the great benefit of the community. And even though we aren't paying taxes, other businesses have come in and are, and there's a lot of real estate that's been sold because people are moving in there, and there's a lot of income tax being paid because people have jobs there, and they are very good, high-paying jobs. So I think it all worked out really well. And I don't hear any criticism about the Pfizer purchase anymore.
I love the negotiation. I think we need to have her come into our real estate class and talk about it. Or she could do personal coaching for some of us. Thank you. Well, but now you're going to head up AAU. And of course, when AAU thinks of research, it's scientific, it's humanities, it's social sciences. So have you developed an agenda?
Well, so the AAU is a very interesting organization. For those of you who are not familiar with it, it's the 60 public and private U.S. universities and 2 Canadian, Toronto and McGill, are part of the AAU. It's an invitation-only organization, and these are the institutions that do the majority of research in the country that's done in academic institutions and educate students at the PhD level. I mean, that's really, it's graduate education research. Rebecca's quite right about, what we focus on. It is also a presidential-led organization. I mean, the presidents they're my bosses, and they are the most important people. And so I will be listening very carefully to what they want, what they have on their agenda, but they've done some very interesting things. I'm going to bring with them, because I really do believe that we need to take a good hard look at graduate education, both how we do it, the success rates of students in particularly PhD programs that I'm quite concerned about nationally, the length of time to degree. I think we really need to look at these issues. We need to look at how we manage sort of thinking about the numbers of students in various fields that we're putting out. We need to think about ways in which people who have PhDs can do things other than replicate what their mentors do and go and teach at research-intensive institutions, because the world is changing. And so I'd really like for us to put a focus on that whole area, and the AAU is very good about doing those kinds of things. You may recall that about a year ago, the AAU banded together, and 27 of the institutions in the AAU did a big survey that was designed by very good social scientists on sexual assault and the prevalence of sexual assault on campuses. The AAU received a lot of criticism when it went about doing this survey, but the current president, Hunter Rawlings, tells me that it's by far has the most impact of anything they have ever done. It is now seen as the gold standard for these kind of surveys, and is being referenced more times in media, like he said 5 times more than any other study that they've ever done. You can criticize it, I think, and I was critical of it in many ways, but at least it tried to help figure out how does this issue sort of play out on university campuses. And so I think one of the natural follow-ups will be in a few years, not too soon, because there's been a lot of rethinking and revision of how universities handle these sorts of issues, needing to be neutral, to respect the rights of both parties. I mean, these are not simple. All of you who are engaged in this know that these are not simple issues, and there are many intersecting factors that make it problematic. But we might want to do a follow-up later. We are always interested in research. We are constantly, in fact, just last week, the AAU and APLU signed a joint letter being worried about some regulations that are being contemplated in Congress about the use of fetal tissue that we're very worried about. And so we're constantly on top of the issues that might have an impact on research. We've been deeply engaged with the NIH on their turning around the dynamic in funding for medical research, and Francis Collins is beginning to gain some traction, and there are some very positive signs that that's beginning to turn around. So the AAU has been right there with him, and I'm sure there are a lot of other issues that will come up. But from my perspective, the AAU has a very I do think it has an influential voice in Washington, but I also think it's most influential when it is in concert with the other higher ed organizations, and I intend to be a good collaborator because I think there is strength in numbers. And in some ways, you know, we all have common cause. We may have different sizes of institutions and the different spectrum of the degrees that we offer, but we're all trying to do the same thing and provide excellent education.
Yeah, and linking AAU with something like AAC and U
Exactly.
around undergraduate
Yes,
research.
it's
and
very
knowledge.
important. Very important.
So that kind of, when I think about undergraduate and research and where universities are going, I immediately think of entrepreneurship.
Sure.
So when Time Magazine rated you as one of the top 10, it was in part because of your incredible history with entrepreneurship at Michigan. And I want to get all this right. You co-founded Ann Arbor's Spark, which is a local biotech and information technology company. You got your board or your regents to allow you to invest $25 million of your endowment for spin-offs. You created University of Michigan's Venture Accelerator that started these spin-offs. I mean, you have a real track record here, somewhat ahead of many of the rest of us. So, you know, why was this important? And how do you see this movement on entrepreneurship in the universities? Is it changing the way we do our work? Is it about partnerships with the outside? What do you see the impact being on us?
Well, one of the reasons that I was pushed so quickly in this direction was the economic circumstance of the state of Michigan. We entered the recession sooner than anybody else, and we exited later than anybody else. And at one point, you know, the state was experiencing 15% unemployment, which was just unbelievable. The auto industry was devastated. So the university, I felt like the university had a huge responsibility to try to respond in some way to help. And that's why we started a lot of the programs that we did. And we were known, I was told this when I walked in the door, that we were known as a very intransigent, difficult place for business to deal with, and you know, it took forever to get licensing agreements, and we were awful. And you know, I think the Ford Motor Company negotiator told me this, and I thought, oh gosh, if Ford Motor feels this way about us, I mean, the only way we can go is up. We got to get better. So. You know, I worked with the VP for research that I had, but then he decided to step down, and that's when I got this guy from Princeton, you know, Steve Forrest, who was so experienced and really understood what it takes for a faculty member to take an idea all the way to a company. So he knew what we had to do. So we started by revising all of our policies, and you have to, you can't just with a wave of a wand make it happen. It's not going to happen. You have to go back and work at it. It took us probably 5 years to do all the things that we needed to do, but we needed to have the faculty understand that we were going to try to be supportive. We also had to make people understand that we couldn't let the lawyers get in the way and think about every possible contingency that could happen that was going to be in the agreements, that we were going to take a risk. We were going to take a risk and say it's more important to get the work out than it is to protect every last possible thing that could happen. We gave intellectual property rights to our students. We don't claim anything for what they do. If they discover something at the university has no participation, it's theirs. We did the accelerator. We did, on the business engagement, we were only interacting with the big companies. By the time I left, we were interacting with 300 small companies a year because we had a place on the edge of campus they could go and park. If they went to that business engagement center, then we had people who were responsible. You would go in and you would have your advocate in the business engagement center to find out whatever you needed to find out in the university. So we tried to make it easy, and it did, and it helped. I think the MINTS program, which is the one you referred to about the endowment. Now, this is very important. I do not believe that the universities can pick winners and losers in business. You can't do it. You shouldn't do it. And that's not the way the MINTS program is designed. This is the $25 million. So here's how it works. If a faculty, it's only for faculty. If a faculty member makes a discovery that's he or she thinks is going to be important for commercial development, and if they go out and convince a venture firm to invest, so the filter here is the outside investor. So if you get an outside investor to significantly invest in your company, then we do passive investment. It's automatic. Then we invest, first round is $500,000, second round is $1 million, and I think we go to a third round. So we're not making the judgment. Anybody who does that is eligible. And I think that I keep sort of account of what's happening here. And we've had some big wins. We've had some losses, because the good thing about this program is it fails fast. And you're not going to want to keep dribbling it out. So if it's going to fail, you want it to fail right away, move on. And that's fine. Failure's fine. I mean, that's one of the things we had to convince our community is in entrepreneurship, you're not going to be successful every time, but that's okay. Then you go. And so now I think we have 13 companies in the portfolio of the Mints. And it'll be up for, whether or not we renew it or expand it, and it'll be the next president, my successor, who decides this. But I think by every measure that, first of all, it made the faculty feel good because they knew we were behind them. We got some really good technology out of it, and we'll make money. I mean, we had done a model. What we had done is look back over the previous 20 years and modeled if we had done this program for over that period of 20 years, and our annual return would have been 16%. It's the best of any private equity firm we've ever been in. And this will be the same. We'll get that kind of return. And so it's those things that I think universities can do to really help. And we were open for business, and we were looking at everything. And our students were actually pushing us and sort of leading the way. And so they developed a lot of their own programs. We tried to put money up for them to help. And we now have many, many more courses. We have joint programs with entrepreneurship certificates. And I think it's been a real positive, because many of our sort of ideas are in the social entrepreneurship realm, as well as in software or medical device or whatever. So it creates an interesting dynamic for your campus, which I know you've done here too.
We're doing.
Yeah.
We're doing.
Yeah.
So I had so much fun doing the research for this. I told Mary Sue, I actually do my own research for this because it's so much fun. And I have like 20 more questions, but I'm only going to ask you 2 more so that you can all ask questions too. So I'm gonna go for laser focus here. Okay. To say you're a prodigious fundraiser is an understatement. You are very good at raising money. And, we're facing a capital campaign, and we look at our needs and financial aid and supporting our faculty and our students in our program. And I think Doug gave statistics. One campaign at $3.2 billion, you kicked off another. I was talking to a fundraiser from another life who worked for you at Michigan and just said, oh my God, the woman has a secret sauce. What is your secret sauce? You can tell us now.
I don't know. I think one of the things I discovered about myself, back when I was a faculty member at Kentucky and I got involved with the Cancer Center, is that I loved being able to explain to people who were interested about the exciting things that we were doing and they could contribute to. And I think I'm a good translator. I think I'm a good translator between the academic world and the donor world. And I think I'm a good translator the other way, between the donor world and the academic world. Because in this business, you have to listen. You really have to listen, and you have to think of what is it the person's telling you, what are their passions, what would they like to. And so part of my job was to helping donors fulfill their dreams and helping the faculty, fashion what it is that they were excited about in a way that donors could understand. So I think it's that nexus between the two, and it takes time. I mean, this is what so many people don't understand. It's all about relationship building. All the fundraisers in this room know it. It's relationship building. And I remember this is a very poignant story for me, but it's one that I think illustrates sort of what happens here. So I was very early in my presidency at Michigan, and I was at a dinner reception, and I'd gotten there early, and it was being hosted by a wonderful person, elderly gentleman who had a son who had just lost his wife to a very aggressive brain tumor. And I knew this. I knew that the son had lost his wife. And he was there, and he was sitting over in a corner by himself. And I went over and introduced myself. And he told me right away what had happened. This is very fresh in his mind. And I thought, okay. And I said, okay, tell me about Nancy. That's his wife. Tell me all about Nancy. What she meant to you. What she was like. That's all we talked about was Nancy. And then I got to know him more. And then he ended up with a multi-million-dollar gift to the university. And he said, it meant everything to me that you came to this big reception and you took 30 minutes to sit there and talk to me about Nancy. It meant everything to me. And so, and I think it's that sense, the sense of trying to figure out what's going on in somebody's life and not to be intrusive or anything like that, but just to figure it out and say, and I know people have told me this who do this for a living, this fundraising, is some of the happiest times in people's lives, I can make them happy by giving a lot of money to something that they are passionate about. They're happy. And my husband and I give, and that's the same for us. I mean, when we do something that we really want and give, we're happier than we've ever been because we've realized a dream. And that's what this is about. I'm selling a dream, and you want to give to that dream, and we have to figure out how to do it so that it really does accomplish a lot for both of us. And so that's all. I mean, nothing other secret about it. But I loved it, and I said it's one of the most fulfilling parts of the job. I've talked to presidents who say they hate fundraising. I loved fundraising.
Yeah. Well, and my friend and many of the articles about you also attributed to your incredible warmth, and I think that story illustrates your warmth. Yeah. So, final question, and you all can ask your questions, or I'll go to mine. Athletics. Now, I know you're a fan because we've already had sightings of Mary Sue and Ken at hockey.
Yes.
At the Battle on the Blake, and I know you've become a devoted pioneer already, and of course you supported athletics at Michigan.
Yeah.
If instead of going to the AAU, you were named the NCAA commissioner, what would you do?
Oh, I knew you were going to ask me that question. It's a tough one. The NCAA is, after all, a collection of universities who are willingly there, governed by a system that they agreed to, a board of directors consisting of a whole bunch of university presidents, and they're deciding what they're going to do. Now, I served on the board of directors of the NCAA, and what I surmised from that experience was that it was all about protecting your turf and not letting anybody else get a competitive advantage on you. So that's why we have all these rules. And these rules have not been promulgated by the commissioner of the NCAA. They've been promulgated by the presidents sitting there at the table, or the athletic directors and their groups, and the faculty reps and their groups, and everybody's out to protect what they want for themselves. I mean, that's what this is all about. Given that, I deeply believe in the value of intercollegiate athletics, deeply. And I do believe that at its best, that it provides a wonderful way for young people who have gifts of athletic prowess to develop those gifts and get a good education. Are there abuses in the system? Absolutely. There are going to be abuses in any system. And I'm particularly, dismayed by this phenomenon in basketball of the students who come for a year and then leave. I sort of think that maybe at a tipping point in turning around, because I don't think it's led to great success on the court. I don't think that's the way to go, but we'll see. So what I would do, I guess, I don't want to avoid your question, what I would do. Because the NCAA commissioner has a very tough job. I do think that the NCAA is going to have to make some significant statement about what went on at North Carolina in the academic fraud. I don't know if they're going to be willing to do it, but I think they need to do it. This is very terrible thing. And I speak as an alma mater, as my alma mater, which I love. But it went on for an unbelievable number of years. And I think they must somehow do something. I don't know what they're going to do, but I hope they do. I do think that the NCAA needs to continue its focus on academic progress. When I was on the board is when we started the academic progress rate work, and really making sure that students were earning credits that would lead to a degree, because one of the things that was happening before that is that students were just amassing credits that didn't lead to a degree, and it was a big abuse of these students. So if I look at where we are in terms of the academic focus on athletes to where we were 30 years ago, it is much improved. People may not realize that, but it actually is. Many more student athletes are graduating, they're getting good. But I think we need to support what they're doing. I mean, we need to support them in many ways with career planning, all sorts of things because these students, in developing their own skills, they're doing something for us as well, for our institutions, that is admirable. I mean, we can all rally around the success of student athletes. And it's something that I think is important and that we should do, and we should do it for the students as well as for us. So I guess those are the two things that I would do. And I think the third thing is just to keep reminding presidents that they need to keep being engaged with the NCAA, because it's their organization. I mean, it's what the presidents actually want for their institutions to have happen. And it's a tough one. And I think, what we've seen with salaries of coaches and the market, it's really troubling. But, we are a free market economy, and, people are going to command those salaries. I don't think we're going to have any luck with antitrust at the NCAA. People have talked about, we need antitrust exemption. Oh, come on. I don't think that's going to happen. So it's a balancing act, but I believe it is far worth keeping and trying to make it better than it is to say we just give up. I don't think we can give up.
Well, we certainly won't give up on athletics, and right. I hope you can come to a lacrosse game soon.
Indeed, okay.
Right. So as you can see, incredibly open and warm and very smart person. What are your questions, comments, suggestions? Or she's a board member at DU, you can lobby her for your favorite concern. Yes.
Yeah.
Terrific. I'm wondering if you would comment on the cost of higher education. And are there innovative
Sure.
programs on the horizon
Sure.
allow more access?
Sure. The question relates to the cost of higher education and the real concern from middle-class families about, and all families, about whether or not they're going to be able to afford to send their son and daughter to college. So yes, this is something that I totally focused on when I was at Michigan, because I was very, very concerned about becoming an institution only for the wealthy, and I thought that would be a terrible thing. So first of all, I think institutions have to work hard on philanthropy to have money for scholarships. I think need-based scholarships are the best, and many states have abandoned, Michigan completely abandoned its scholarship programs during the recession, and none of this has come back. We do what we call return to aid, where we charge the full tuition for those who can pay, and then we return financial aid to those who can't, because we want to pay to keep our doors open. I looked at it from the point of view of a state university where state support has plummeted, and of course, it's one of the reasons I worked on this Lincoln project so hard that Doug had talked about, is to try to make it very clear what has happened. It's been pretty devastating for the states, and many institutions are finding innovative ways. The interesting part about the cost of education equation is that, at least from the point of view of the public institutions, the reasons that tuitions have risen so rapidly is because the state support has declined. It's 80% of the reason. I mean, we can document that over and over again. We haven't had a huge influx of administrators. We haven't been hiring, unbridled hiring. None of that has happened. Our cost per FTE of educating students has stayed basically constant for the last 10 years. And that comes as a surprise to a lot of people because they think that somehow we're just willy-nilly with our spending, and we're not. So I think we have multiple ways at a private institution. I know Rebecca is really focused on the next campaign, financial need-based aid. I mean, those are just going to have to become important features for the future, and to raise the alarm. I think all of us have to raise the alarm, because if we somehow become just the place where only the wealthy can go, then we will fracture the society. I mean, I firmly believe that access to higher education and excellent higher education is one of the best ways to reduce income disparity that we have in this country. We need to work to make sure that the students are not borrowing too much money. I mean, there are all sorts of ways that we need to be addressing and put it at the top of the agenda. But there are no silver bullets.
I just want to give a plug, too, for a book. Doug and I were just speaking about it today, Bill Bowen's book,
Yes.
Lesson Plan, that just came out. Bill's a very famous economist, was at Princeton and then the Mellon Foundation. And it's a superb kind of debunking of some of the myths going around in the American public today.
Sure.
One myth is that undergraduates are graduating with enormous debt. The fact is they're graduating with pretty much the same kind of debt load they have for 40 years.
Yeah.
Graduate students are graduating.
That's
with
right.
much more
They are. They are. I think we
Mr.
had
Taussig.
I have a granddaughter who's graduating. She's been accepted to the University of Michigan. I'm not on the committee picking the university, but after we talk today, I'm going to go home and call her and tell her
Okay.
think about the University of Michigan. I have two questions. When you built these dorms, did you consider housing for faculty within the dorms so that there was more interaction between faculty and students? And the second question is sort of the half of what the previous questioner asked, and that is, how are universities going to deal with positioning students better for jobs when they leave? Forgetting the cost,
Sure.
how are we going to change education so that they are more competitive coming out?
Okay. Your granddaughter who's been admitted to Michigan?
Yeah.
And what field?
I don't know. Psychology is probably what she's going to
Oh, psychology in graduate school.
No. She's not high school. She's graduating.
Oh, she's an undergraduate. Oh, well. No question. She should come to Michigan.
Or DU.
Yeah, there you go. Or DU, right. She has those two choices. Right. Of course. So the question of faculty in residence hall. Well, so we were not really building. We only built one new dorm. We were renovating, deep renovations, where we basically gutted the buildings and then brought them back with new sort of interiors and new construction. So we have one of our residence halls that is a residential college where we have many more classrooms and offices for faculty. The faculty don't live there, but they're there daily. In fact, the students who go to the residential college, I think they have a contest to see who doesn't have to get out of their pajamas longest in this, going into the semester, because they just go from their rooms to the classes to eat, so they never really have to go outside. But the other residence halls, what we did was to really build interactive spaces so that faculty could go in, but we don't have people living in the undergraduate. We have resident advisors, which are upper class students, but that didn't seem to work for us. Interestingly enough, though, in the graduate residence hall, we have one floor. It's the 7th floor, which is a premium because it has these gorgeous views. It can be used for visiting faculty and visiting scholars, because we found that there was a big need across the university when they had people coming to stay for a month or for a semester. They weren't going to bring their families. They were often from international places, and they wanted a nice, convenient place to stay. And so that has apparently been very popular, and particularly with the interaction with graduate students. So that's how we looked at that particular issue. And so your next question was about preparing students for careers. So I am a great believer in the liberal arts. great believer. I just believe you learn how to think and be adaptable, and many parents are horrified when their young person wants to study history or philosophy, but this is very good background. In fact, if you go and check with a lot of people who have become CEOs and real leaders, they had liberal arts backgrounds, and because they weren't learning to do something specific. Where I think we have fallen down, and I know that DU is very concerned about this and really working on it, and I think has a huge opportunity to make a big difference, is in the career advising. And how do you, are there things that you should do as an undergraduate, courses you could take or whatever, that would give you sort of an extra sort of dimension of what you're going to do? And then how do you go about thinking about getting your first job and what you do and how you show your capacity? So my view is that while we need as faculty and institutions to be listening to the outside world, and I think DU has done a fabulous job here, particularly with cybersecurity issue. We need so many more people in that area, that they've thought about how to bring people in fact, who had backgrounds in liberal arts, not necessarily in engineering or computer science, and get them into these fields. This is a way that I think universities can be really, have a big impact and be helpful. And I think we're doing more of that now, which is good.
Okay, I'm looking over here to see if there's a question from this side of the room. Yes, sir.
Promoting diversity?
Inclusivity,
yeah. Well, of course, this was a big theme of mine in Michigan when we took our cases to the Supreme Court. And, in fact, one of the reasons that I was interested in the Michigan job was I was sitting in Iowa at the time, and I so admired that Michigan was willing to go all the way to the Supreme Court and fight this and spend an enormous amount of money defending affirmative action, because I do believe it is a very gentle tool that works. It had worked at Michigan enormously well, and we were able to preserve affirmative action for everybody in the country, but then the citizens of Michigan voted that we can use affirmative action, so everybody else could use it except us at Michigan. So, oh, great. This is what you get. So then we've had a hard job. I mean, it's been a very tough job for us. But we've tried all sorts of mechanisms to encourage students to come. And I think that, unfortunately, for us in Michigan, it was a very chilling effect, because the students felt like they weren't wanted by the citizens of the state. I mean, that's not a good thing. And so, we visited churches, visited high schools, really got our students engaged in helping to recruit, trying to do things on campus. But this is always an issue. And in my last year at Michigan, we had the social media campaign, Being Black at Michigan, and that was swept nationwide. And it was very hard and very sobering for me to listen to the voices of these students, of what their experiences were like on campus. But I listened, everybody listened, and we worked with these students, and we've now done some things differently at the university because of their concerns, and I thought they were legitimate concerns. I think one of the things that we've tried at Michigan after I left that has really had the most positive effect of anything that we've done is we've tried. You have to work on campus. I mean, clearly the environment you have on campus is important, so that you have to keep working at that every day. But you have to get the students there in the first place. I mean, what was happening is that we would have, increases in our applications from underrepresented students, and then they wouldn't come. They wouldn't accept our offer. And so what we started doing is making the admission and the financial aid decision almost instantaneous. That helps a lot, and it helps with families who don't know how they're going to pay. And the other thing that we are really working on at the national level, and in fact one of these Lincoln Project things, is to change the FAFSA form. I mean, I had one of my CEOs, the CEO of Domino's, who was on our Lincoln Project committee, downloaded the FAFSA form, this is the financial aid form, and started to fill it out, and he said halfway through he gave up. Here's a guy who's a leader, very well educated. He said, I can't imagine asking families to do this. And so we've been working with Lamar Alexander. We have a proposal, actually it was devised by a woman at the University of Michigan, Sue Donarski, who really showed you could get 95% of the information you need from 2 questions. You know, what's your family size and what's your income? And we have the IRS database so we can confirm their income. That's all you need. And you'll get 95% of what you need. And we are leaving out hundreds of thousands of students a year because they can't fill out the FAFSA form. It's stupid. So that's the kind of common sense things that I think if we did that on the front end, and that would benefit everybody. I mean, that's not just our underrepresented minority students, that would benefit everybody. And then, you know, we need to continue the work that we do every day on campus. And always be willing to listen, because you may not know what's going on. And you have to have eyes and ears out there everywhere to tell you what's really happening on the ground.
So as Doug comes back up stage to thank you, I do want to just give one note. These questions were also on my list, but there was one thing we didn't get to talk about, which is my favorite quote so far, which is, some people say publish or perish. I say partner or perish, because one of the other amazing things you did was you created not only partnerships with the community, partnerships within higher education.
Yeah.
So hats off to you.
Okay, thank you.
This is tremendous. Will you join me in thanking Mary Sue, please?
Thank you.
So, thank you to Rebecca for leading the wonderful conversation, and Mary Sue, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us today.